Hey you guys, today we're going to be looking at Shiva's abilities that Clive uses in Final Fantasy XVI. Welcome to my breakdown series, Final Fantasy XVI's Iconic style system. Before we jump into the abilities, I want to point out something that the devs did early on when showcasing Shiva in these trailers for the first time. When you max out an ability, you're actually able to freely move that into any slot regardless of if it's the Eikon's ability or not. So you can take Garuda's ability off of Garuda once it's maxed and put it into like Ramuh or Shiva's ability slots. And this is actually what the developers did when they first showed off Shiva. They swapped out Shiva's abilities for Ramuh's lightning abilities. It was actually really confusing when we saw the Shiva ability slot, or whatever you want to call it, appear, and then instead of ice abilities, Clive is attacking with lightning. So if anyone else was confused, I hope that clears it up for you. So now let's take a look at Shiva's actual abilities. For all these attacks, Clive manifests this mantle around him that he spins around with, so I'm not going to point it out each time, but it is a pretty nice animation. Let's look at the first ability, Mesmerize. This has Clive spinning and shooting out these ice spears at enemies. These explode into ice when they hit the enemy. A line of ice though trails behind these spears, and Clive pulls enemies towards himself to drive them close enough to hit. The most I've seen is 6 separate spears that drag enemies in. Bigger enemies obviously won't get pulled in, but will still take damage from this attack. Rhyme is the next ability, and is pretty much the opposite of Mesmerize. Clive will shoot forward this blast of ice that forms a snowflake with 2 strings of ice that spin around it. This keeps enemies suspended in the air, circling around it. This seems to have a small area effect though, as it passes by this enemy on the ground and doesn't drag him into the air. So it's not going to be a magnet-like ability like in Kingdom Hearts, where the attack would catch any surrounding enemies. Let's look at Diamond Dust next. This seems to be associated with your Cold Snap ability, as the ability wheel opens during the cast of this, and we see your Ramuh's ability slotted in. So we know that this is an ability that was triggered from the set abilities. Cold Snap is a dashing ability that will trigger a dodge and freeze action if you successfully use this against an incoming attack. We see this in the State of Play trailer here, though it triggers Permafrost instead of Diamond Dust here. So either your dodge timing impacts this with a perfect dodge triggering a more powerful freeze, or this will change as you level up this ability. We can also see this Cold Snap ability used as a kind of dodge. In the air it even gives you a bit of airtime, so it'll be a nice ability to use both in combat and traversal. Ice Age is the last ability we have seen, and has Clive using his free hand to throw ice forward towards enemies. This has a gauge that will trigger different sizes and functions for the ice attack. This one that hits the red gauge has a giant, almost pincer set of icicles at the end of the attack that throws enemies up into the air and freezes them. This smaller patch of ice we saw earlier is probably triggered when you attack too early in this black area. I also imagine we'll just start with a basic ice attack, and then as we level it up we will get access to this gauge and bigger attacks. Also, I really love the hit attacks, just the way that it spreads out around just looks so cool. And that's all we've seen so far for Shiva's attacks and abilities. I think this is going to be a great form to use on controlling the flow of combat. With many of Shiva's abilities, you can decide where enemies are. You can pull them in close or push them out. All of these attacks are grouping the enemies together to control the field and flow of battle. If used correctly, this could be a really strategic icon to bring into mob fights. Of course, there's also the freezing aspect and slowing enemies down so you can catch your breath. Anyways, hope you've enjoyed this deep dive on the iconic battle system of Final Fantasy XVI. If you want to see more, leave a like or drop a comment. That really helps me out with the algorithm. If you enjoy this, I've done a ton of content over on Kingdom Hearts, so click the cards on screen to see that. A huge thank you to my patrons and channel members. If you enjoy this and you want to throw me some support, you can throw me $1 over on YouTube. Become a member, get some nice emotes and a badge beside your name. Really helps me out. Anyways, see you in the next video.